Hello and welcome everyone to this session, this case study session about T-Mobile and their continuous delivery journey and their strategy. My name is Scott Edwards and I'm a Director of Product Marketing at CA Technologies, and it is my privilege today to introduce Martin Kreinke from T-Mobile. Martin started his career at T-Mobile as an embedded system software engineer, and he is now the Senior Development Manager at T-Mobile. For the past 15 years, he's been involved in software development management, including the strategic vision and overseeing the creation of technology solutions that drives DevOps and continuous delivery. For the past 6 years, he's been at T-Mobile, and while he was initially hired to create an internal development testing team and to standardize the configuration management, his role has expanded to now include development tools to improve how development works and to automate many of those processes. He has been the driving force in the adoption of service virtualization, service deployment automation, and building the foundation for continuous delivery. Martin, we welcome you.
Thank you. All right, so T-Mobile, you're probably somewhat familiar with us, probably more so now in the last couple of years than over the last 6 before that. We were always that trailing, oh, and there's T-Mobile. We've gotten a new CEO in who's certainly energized both people at T-Mobile, but the industry. We're at 61.2 million customers. We were a few years ago at, let's call it 40 million. This is huge growth for us, very fast. Let's call it 50% growth in the last 3 years or so. So a very big deal for us. Revenues have been going up. We've got a lot of, obviously, employees. Our IT teams consist in the thousands. And then we like to talk about how fast we have in the fastest nationwide 4G LTE network. But all of this has been because of the activities that we call Uncarrier. You've probably seen the ads, T-Mobile the Uncarrier. We just announced Uncarrier 10 in the last week or two, which was really all about us being able to now give streaming on certain environments like Netflix and all that. You can get that free on your phone. So it does not cost you anything on your bandwidth. So those types of things have really been fueling the growth. But if you're fueling the growth, where's that pressure going to come? That pressure is going to come on the IT teams and the engineering staffs to keep up with that growth, continue to grow. So what I'm going to talk about here is not the end-all solution, certainly. Things that, and approaches of what we've been on in our path to do continuous delivery and DevOps and where we started. Some of the things I'm going to talk about first are just what we've been doing that just made sense. You may not be ready for DevOps, you may not be ready for continuous delivery, process challenges, cultural challenges, but some of the just fundamental technologies that you need to do to get there are easy sells and make sense. So what are those and how do I like to talk about it? I talk about these foundational pillars, these technical pillars of continuous delivery that you need to get into place. So such things as standardizing your configuration management processes. That was just number one. That was the first thing I did when I came to T-Mobile. The day 2 weeks into my job at T-Mobile, I was in charge of a middleware platform that was being developed, and they were trying to do their first QA drop. It wasn't going so well, and I suddenly see an email come from the database developer to the DBA that says, hey, try this script out. It's attached on the email document. I was quite surprised for the size of IT organization that was the type of processes we were having. So that was going to be something we needed to tackle right away. Service virtualization, huge when it comes to environment challenges. If you ask our development teams from their perspective what the number one issue is, it's environments. The second one will be the release processes, but number one is environments. They'll talk about how much time they have to spend putting into supporting it, how much extra money they have to budget in for all the support time they're going to have when they put things into, for example, QA. Automated deployment and environment management. All right, that's another one that's really important. You've got to be able to have repeatable processes, right? Everything you hear in here about continuous delivery, DevOps, this conference, it's going to be automation, repeatable processes, things like that. And then finally, automated test. All right, manual tests aren't going to get it done if you're talking about You know, what was the things with Google, what Gene Kim was talking, millions and millions of tests, 45 million tests. Even if it's across multiple environments, those tests are being run and run again. You're never going to get that with, you can't get enough people even to do that, couldn't afford it. So around that, I also like to talk about a few other things. Software design and architecture, all right? So you can be doing all these other things in those foundational pillars, but the more the development teams start to put it into their architecture to support those activities, that's a huge thing. It's very important. Fundamentally, you have to have a strong architecture if you're going to get all the way over to the goal of continuous delivery. Governance and process is important. Sometimes people consider me to think that I'm not for process. In fact, as I went back to that original story about the problems we had with configuration management, we needed process. You can't just send an email through to somebody saying, hey, try this script out and let's see if that does the job when you're trying to do a full deployment. And then I like to tie it around with a workflow system. I talk about a workflow system. It's something in a proposal I've written up in the last few months. What I did with workflow systems is saying, look, we'll take our workflow system and we'll map out our entire process. Manual steps, if it needs approval, if I need 3 approvals to get something into QA, I'm going to put those into that workflow process. And as we automate those steps, we're going to see those improvements. I can start to have metrics right there to show management how we're improving the process. So that is something that I've talked more about today. Now, it was interesting in Gene Kim's talk, I don't know who all might have attended that, but in his title, he called it the enterprise journey. It was interesting because in my slide, I talk about our journey. It is a journey, probably a few more turns than that one has in it, in that road. It's probably a little more ups and downs as well, but it is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can work your way there. We all get excited, I know I do. When I come to these, I get new ideas, get invigorated, and then I got to go back to the company, and I have the same challenges that probably most all of you have out there, which are the code delivery. It's taking too long. We're trying to move faster. We're meeting those Uncarrier moves, but I'm building up technical debt as I go. I'll fix it later. We'll take care of that architectural issue. Things like that are happening. Transformation, I mean, this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about transformation. There were shirts being handed out that said, this is what transformation looks like, right? We're talking transformation. Challenge with that is that when we talk about people, process, technology, those 3 common terms we talk about, technology is the easy part. Process, people get very intertwined, right? So when we're intertwining those, it starts to become to what I would call job insecurity. If you're transforming and that process goes away, what am I going to do for a job? So we have those types of challenges that we have to consider. We can't just blindly ignore them. If we just charge off and do it, somebody gets upset, they take a different job, and in the short term, we're broken. All right? But in the end, the expectation is from our customers, my business customers, things that we're doing, we need to respond from IT in a faster manner and cost less. All right, so development teams were really hounding my VP. I was one of the senior managers, other senior managers that kept talking about our environments are a problem, it's a big deal. And so he was hearing enough of this. He was getting pressure from the app support side of things, that why are things not working when you deliver them, or why do we have these issues? And so he came in with a question. Says, how can we deliver code quickly and reliably? So we have this meeting set up, and I get a call the night before from my boss who says, Martin, could you bring some thoughts, some ideas of what's going on, what we might do to fix some of these issues? Because sometimes we get to those meetings and people don't always want to jump in and contribute, and you always have some thoughts and ideas. And I said, sure, absolutely. I'll think about that some more, make sure I have some ideas. The next morning, just before the meeting, I IM'd my boss and said, you know what, I've been thinking about it. I'm not going with all these little fixes, different things we can do. That's not our issue. I'm going strategic. That's all I said to him. And all he came back with was, cool, that's awesome. He didn't even ask, which I really appreciate about my boss. He was really good about that. And so we get to the meeting, and he had no idea what I was going to say. We get there, Chuck, our VP, says, all right, what do you guys have? Now, I'd like to think it was a 60-second awkward pause. It was probably more like, knowing me, 15 or 20 seconds. And then I said, well, I have some thoughts, but they're more strategic in nature. Maybe some other people want to talk first. And Chuck said, no, go ahead, please. And so what I did is I had 2 sheets of paper. And I had one, and I said, look, we have development, and we have operations. This was the concept of DevOps, where I then started to explain the overall concept of what DevOps was about. Getting the operations teams and the development teams closer together, working more closely, all those activities. What was interesting, it was really the first time DevOps had been mentioned at T-Mobile. And what was interesting is every senior manager in that room and director said, that's what we need. Chuck had been used to hearing things about everybody in agreement complaining about something, but here's something that was put on to talk about how to be proactive, to move forward, and everybody was in unanimous agreement. We like that, that's where we need to go. And to be honest, everything that we'll talk about and things that we do, and I'll be talking a little bit about where we are in the process at T-Mobile, has been because Chuck, as the VP, has continued. We got a new CIO. He continued to champion these concepts, help keep moving it along. So let's talk a little bit more then about our processes that we have that we've been putting in, those 4 pillars that I talked about. And I like to use the terms being effective and efficient. You'll also see it come up in some guiding principles I talk about. Right? It's really important that you've got to be constantly, am I being effective in what I'm doing and being efficient? If you're part of a development organization, you probably run in a lot of times that, man, why do I have to go through that process? All that does is keep me held up. I have things that I can deliver. I'm responsible for mobility in our stores, so our tablets and how we're doing sales and things on those, and we continue to improve it. I put systems in that can support continuous delivery, but our processes aren't there yet. And we can make a change in 5 minutes. It can take me 2 weeks to get it into production, right? So we're not quite there yet on our being effective and efficient all the way through yet. But again, those pillars, I have those in place. I'll talk a little bit about this. So some of the challenges that we had when I came in, we had inconsistent processes, all right? So that led to challenges in our code and our application stability, right? You deploy to production, we thought it was working okay, got under load, something else happened. Builds were a lot of times manual, right? So those types of things, we went ahead and we started to automate. A lot of people, I think today, have done continuous builds. You're probably also working maybe towards continuous integration with some testing to go along with that, right? Those things have been really important. Service virtualization, I'll skip to the third one here for a moment. Service virtualization has been a huge one for us. And we continue to just push the boundaries out on how we use it. Started off originally, T-Mobile bought Metro PCS. There was kind of a set of consolidations. AT&T tried to buy us, that didn't quite work out. We bought Metro. They were a prepaid company, people who pay for their phones, their service ahead of time type of thing. It was a good company, had good connections, or I should say cell coverage in areas that we didn't have. It was a great partnership there to have. But we were having problems. They needed to get their systems to talk to our systems, and we had to modify our middleware. Well, how were we going to do that? Because we needed to get this merger going, and we needed to be rolling quickly. So in the end, what we did is, while the middleware teams at T-Mobile were getting their services, we knew what those contracts were going to look like. So we virtualized those so that the Metro folks could start hitting those to start testing their systems sooner. That was the first thing we did. The next thing that I tackled actually in that front was training environments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But training environments were great. I actually got the comment from the sales operations people that it was going to change how they hired people, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. Automated testing. We started out our automated testing on the middleware side of the house. So some of you may be able to relate to this. Our testers really focus on the UI functional capabilities. If I need to put in a new phone, you're buying a phone, it goes in the system, you pick a rate plan, we're going to calculate out what your payment is each month, we're going to tell you, maybe what your tax is. If you're maybe on a plan where you're going to make installment payments on your phone, we've got to give you those plans. They're very good at that. They can test those things. It was manual, but they could get through it. Our problem was, all the middleware calls behind it weren't being exercised. So there's many data permutations that can happen, and there's just no way to cover all of that from a UI manual testing. It'd even be hard to test if you had automated testing, because you also got to think about the negative test cases and how do you want to try to inject effectively back into the application capabilities to see how the system responds if it comes back with maybe something you didn't expect or other types of data. So we started testing the middleware and automated. We got up to 5,000 test cases. That drove our metrics big time. We could show how many other issues we found and fixed, which of course led to better stability in the production environments. And then finally, deployment automation. This is one where we really started to take the time to figure out how are we going to start putting these things into our environments. We're still not automated to our production. We're just getting now to where we're talking about in QA, and we've been doing some of it in our dev integration test environments, which are really the environments owned by the devs to try to do more testing. All right, so here's a little bit more about the value and the things that we were delivering. I use developers. I really like to use developers and have them work on the activities that we're doing. And the reason is developers have a set of tools and their coding skills, the way they look at creating design patterns, all these types of activities are incredibly valuable. So you may have somebody that's really good at scripting, and that's great. There's types, but a lot of times you have different disparate tools that you need to bring together. So to that end, we really want to bring them in with a lot of capabilities that the developers can do and really integrating that in a tighter system. So we also had the ability to shrink our team sizes. We didn't need the same sizes of teams as we did this. It didn't require many, many resources. We could actually stay agile, a little bit more nimble with that. The comments that people talk about, the larger you get a team, the less output you get from it, right? Gene Kima even had a slide on that activity. So those are things that become really important to think about. So the centralized RCM team. So I talked about at the beginning the whole challenges with the scripts being sent through an email, deployments not going well. We had a lot of challenges here. So one of the things was that every system we have had a different build process to go with it. The CM folks, the configuration management people, were doing something different. Release notes, all those capabilities were all different. So if you're a support person, you're looking at this and going, what do I do with this, right? I've got stuff, but I'm not really confident in what's going on. And of course, the less confident the support teams are, then they feel like they are obligated, and I think rightfully so is, I need to protect my environments. So we get a lot of times in a situation where people are talking about, look, change is risk, and risk is bad in a production environment. So if I have that, I don't want that. Now, I don't know what you're changing. I'm not clear, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to have you do a lot of other meetings that you, developer, are not going to like and are going to be mad about, but I need those because I don't trust what's going in. And guess who the #1 call is when that system isn't working right? They don't call the developer right away. It's the support guy. Why isn't this running? All right? We might have had a situation where we were an hour-and-a-half outage. 2 minutes, we knew we had an outage. Took us an hour and 28 minutes to figure out where the problem was. Then it turns out maybe it was a configuration value somewhere on a server that was incorrect. So we wanted to standardize all that. So by doing this and getting more consistent release process, using fewer tools, reducing that set of tools, all those things, I was able to take a team that was roughly 50 people and reduce that by 40%, all right? So now I had a team that was far more effective in what they were doing. We're driving those efficiencies. All right, those again, consistency, continuity, effective and efficient processes, that's really what this was bringing to us. And then the repeatability, of course, is really important. Again, back to our thing about automation is really critical. All right, so our automated middleware testing. So I talked about some of this. We really were increasing the quality of the middleware services. Nobody had been specifically focusing on those areas. The testers were doing what they could, but they weren't looking at that. And as we got into it and started testing it, we started uncovering a lot of issues. We could start to put in different types of values. What if the UI came through its application and it submits a value that's not in the correct format that it should be because the WSDL, maybe on a web service, allowed it? We could test that. You couldn't test that from the UI because maybe at that time the UI is actually blocking for that. But how many times did you have a feature that was in there, it was working one day, and the next day it changed? So we could exercise this. And again, it's automated, so we could repeatedly go after those activities over and over. We're now just really, to be honest, getting into UI testing. We were really struggling there. We have done a lot of manual testing, but we need automation. We have some folks now that are really starting to try to focus on that, look at how we can solve those types of issues. So deployment automation, all right? So the key here for us really was getting a more consistent deployment methodology. Right now, as it is today, we have our dev integration test environments. Development is generally responsible for those environments, and they can put the code in how they want to put it in and deploy it. We have another team that is strictly responsible for the QA organization, all right? So they're trying to do their deployments. And then we have a third team, which is our application production support teams that do it for production. And we're having a lot of conversation about this right now. This has been an ongoing conversation. My concern is I have 3 different ways to deploy it. The guy at the end, the application support person, or gal, we have some very fine women in that organization, we struggle because they're on the receiving end and they haven't been involved in those other processes. One of the things that I've been doing much more, so let's talk about DevOps, is having just even meetings with the operations team on a weekly basis. It's been an interesting exercise. We've been doing this for about 6 months with my team and the corresponding support team for production. Those teams working together, we've got them, the support people now going, oh, I can ask you about a problem I'm having, and you might be able to come up with a solution for me. And typically we can. I asked one time, I thought a deployment should take 15 minutes. It ended up taking almost 2 hours. I asked the question to the teams in that meeting, development, how complex did you think this release would be? Going in, what did you think? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being really easy, 5 really complex. I have, including the configuration management person, 1, 1.5, a really light, easy thing for us to do. App support? 4, 4.5 is what we would have thought. They thought it was really complex. Why that discrepancy? All right? So we started talking about it. And that's where we started to find out how we were viewing the systems. If you're an app support person, you viewed it one way. If you're a development person, you were looking at it like, well, I just throw it in this way. So what we're working on and trying to figure out now is, okay, we're seeing those things. We can start to adjust. We can clean up those things for production. This team in the middle that's doing all the QA deployments, they're not communicating with production. They communicate with development some. We have challenges. Doesn't seem like that's the most effective way for us to do it. So as we start working on these deployment automation tools, involving the production teams, support teams, and we'll work on how we kind of get the QA. There's other thoughts and things that we've been talking about how we might solve that. My clicker, all right. Service virtualization. I've talked a fair bit about this one at this point, but there are a few things that we did with it, and it's a thing that I've been like to do. We're actually trying to maybe even do this with continuous delivery a little bit. The idea of a center of excellence. Center of excellence doesn't mean that this is a team that builds everything, does everything, they're all the all-in team. In fact, they're the ones that we want to have teach everybody else how to fish. You want to do that virtualization? We can help you. We'll set you up with some initial design patterns, activities that you can use, and then we're going to help you do that. I recently picked back up our development test organization. So our dev test, this is a team that we have separate of the QA org to try to test things in our quest for shift to the left, shake things out much sooner in the process. And when I was talking to them, the manager of that team, it came out that 60% of his team was dedicated to trying to get an end-to-end environment up and running so that everybody could try to run in that test. 60%. I'm looking at the numbers going, so you're telling me that only 40% of the money I'm spending is actually going into immediate testing of that code? Yeah, and I said, Well, okay, that might not be so bad. When do you get the end-to-end environment? If you got it done in a week and a half, well, I might be able to at least tolerate that. No, it's at best, we're hoping we can be 2 days before we go to QA, we've got an end-to-end environment working. But usually we're into QA at that point, and then we'll do some focus on it, we try to do it. So that was a really kind of eye-opener for me, and I'm thinking about this and going, 60%, that's not working for me. It just, we'll have to figure this out, we're gonna need to figure these end-to-end environments out, but let's do this. Let's get those testers who've been busy focused on trying to get an end-to-end environment, and let's focus on the app we need to be on, those UI applications. So let's get them virtualizing the middleware services, and then I can have an integration environment where we're kind of doing the builds and the whole CI model, and having them do that. And now we'll get that focus. And we just did it, they put themselves on a 30-day plan. They didn't quite get all the way there, but we had a big release we were doing in November. And they actually made some really good headway there, and they learned a lot. The thing that I like now about the CA release automation, or not, sorry, release automation, the virtualization and the dev test tools, is they've now created a web portal. We have developers who were starting also to do some of these virtualization pieces. But if any of you are familiar with the product, there was a console that you had to go in. You kind of had to know that console. And that's where the Center of Excellence was really there. Those guys could help set you up, do things. With this web portal, we could point this to other developers now. We could show them how to do something. They could get to it with a website. And then the things that they were doing, they were still stubbing with maybe some Java code. A common one that we found was they were using SOAP UI. And they were like, look, I can do the same thing with SOAP UI. As we went through this and kept doing it, they suddenly realized, wait a moment, your data's changing. SOAP UI, it's like it's a fix, this is the response you get back. Why is your data changing? Well, we have that ability. That's a key thing about service virtualization. You know, an example I like to use, it's just kind of a simple one, is credit checks. One of the things that comes back in a credit check is you're trying to determine what your credit class is going to be. That determines for us things like what's your down payment, those types of activities. So in that, we said, well, you know what? Let's use the middle initial. When somebody's testing, you put a middle initial in of A, it'll come back as a credit class A. They put in a C, well, it's credit class C. Really simple. Just that one thing suddenly gave you ability to change a variety of permutations just with that virtualization. So again, the COE is not about everything goes to that COE team. They do everything. They're helping everybody else bring that. And we've found some really good success. Training environments was kind of cool. When I proposed service virtualization, I talked about the Metro merger, the things we could do there. We talked about these, substitutions for end-to-end environments to do this testing. And another one was training. Because what we wanted was people to be able to do training in a non-live environment and actually be hands-on with the applications. At the time, I was rolling out a mobility platform. We had web apps that were running on the tablets, and we needed them to get an experience. It was not the same thing as being on a desktop. How are we going to do that? You can't have them do it in the live system. I had been told that previously, we at T-Mobile had tried to have a full end-to-end system for our activation system, our point of sale, all that together. They had 2 people dedicated to try to keep it up and running, and they could not keep it up running. It was generally before I got there. They couldn't do it. Really complex. Service virtualization gives us the ability to keep much more of the pace with as the releases are coming. Here's your new capabilities, and they were there and available to be on. One of the sales operations senior managers said to me, this is really cool. This is going to change how we hire people. I did not expect that. I had no idea. Where did that come from? You think about it, I'm a snowboard instructor. We like to talk about how different people learn, right? If you're a teacher, you do the same thing. Some people are visual. Some are kinesthetic. They've got to do it. This was one of the things that he was talking about. They can be hands-on. So rather than just sitting in a classroom and seeing, okay, PowerPoint after PowerPoint, this is how you activate, they got to do it with their hands. Totally opened up the number of people that could be using the system, learn it, and they could hire the sales associates for that. So that was pretty cool. So you get some of those really neat side effects. And then finally, this whole shift to left, which we've been talking about, was really a big deal. All right, so I've talked about the technologies and things that we've been doing on the technology side, that again, these are just, it's hard for management not to say, man, why wouldn't I want to have those builds more consistent? I can be repeatable, the app support people, oh, wow, you're going to give me some really great consistency now that I didn't have. I know what's coming, all right? So that's the technology side. Over the last couple of years, starting with the DevOps discussion, we had a new CIO. It's really become a forefront of the team. The Uncarrier moves really drive us to this need for talking about DevOps and continuous delivery. So now, in our organizational goals, I want to say maybe it was about 6 months ago, the CIO came out with an email that said, continuous delivery and agile methodology is going to be at the core of our organizational goals and what we're going to do as an IT organization, right? That starts to get everybody onto the same page. So what did we do with that? One, a cross-functional team was formed, of which I'm part of, and we've been talking about how to move towards the continuous delivery. This has people from the process side, right? Our project management folks. We have people like myself that are from the development teams. We have the QA organization. You have all those people. So the discussions are happening, which is great, right? Teams are starting to take those things from the foundational pillars and use them in other places, all right? They're starting to take those forward. Automations from the deployments, things that we might be doing from automated test, all those things. Service virtualization is one that we really are getting to take off. And I think configuration management's been a pretty solid one for us more recently, at least at the core of builds and stuff. From that also, people who worked on those activities have owned some of those things through the opportunity of reorganization, promotions, also got the opportunities to go into other teams and bring that knowledge with them. So we've been seeding it. You see these activities happening right now as we go along. Let's talk a little bit about something else that I talked about in that steering team that I mentioned, this kind of cross-functional team, talk about continuous delivery and how we were going to get there. I laid out a set of guiding principles. There are things that I work with my development teams all the time. This is how I want us to view things. It's how we want to be as a larger organization. And you'll see these types of things in different forms than anybody that's talking about continuous delivery. These just happen to be my wording and type of activities, or ways to do it. First of all, promote innovation, all right? I want people to get out of the box. Don't tell me this is the way we do it. That might be how we do it now. What could we do to be better about it? Why do we do it that way? Is there something better? I'm always asking why. My guys will come in and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And I'll go, why? And it's my thing to challenge the assumptions. I talk about, as a manager, I think half my job is to remove the assumptions that the development teams have placed on themselves, effectively, artificially. They've made a conclusion about something, but they haven't noticed they've done that. All right, this is a big one. Mistakes become learning opportunities. Gene Kim, in his talk this morning, talked about a high trust culture. It's really important, right? Everybody's got to be able to work together. If something happens, then let's figure out what we need to do to improve it the next time. You know, we're probably like, I think most companies, sometimes this happens. The instinct when something happens is, who did it, why, what are we going to do about it? But what are we going to do about it in the context of, all right, how are we going to prove? But if it is more of an accusatory, a situation where you're going to be trying to pin it on somebody, that isn't so good. All right, so we really want to be in a situation where we're saying, look, stuff happens. We don't want to be flippant about it. We don't want to be casual. I mean, this is why we have all the automated tests, other things we're talking about. But again, it's important. Open to change and ideas. So the thing I talked about when we talk about people and process, the culture. Culture is a really big deal. That's a hard one to overcome. People get those processes intertwined. And so it's like, well, wait a moment. You were suggesting a change into something I do. Well, why would I? No. You know, it's an instinct. It's a kind of human nature a lot of times. You know, I like to think of myself as a fairly innovative guy, but I even have to check myself sometimes because my development, the whole idea is I put stuff out there. Development teams should be coming back with even better ideas. I talk about when you guys get ahead of me on the ideas, I know we're cooking with gas because you own that product. You're doing everything you can to make it the best you can. Collaboration becomes critical. We can't be in the silos. And this is one of the things that we're at T-Mobile working through right now. And I'll talk in a moment about a little bit more of things that we've done organizationally to actually get it, trying to create more of a collaborative architecture. I was at the DevOps Summit in New York, and somebody came to me afterwards and said they had formed up a DevOps team, was what the idea was. They wanted to do DevOps, and so what management did is they put all the app support people in the same, one of these open concept rooms, and they put all the developers in the same room. But that was as far as it went at that moment. And my comment was that felt like the junior high dance. The guys are on one side of the room and the girls on the other side of the room, and they won't talk together, right? They might go find the buffet, but in between, they're not really communicating. So you've got to really work to foster that collaboration. It's a key guiding principle. Again, you've been hearing me talk about it. Be effective and efficient in everything that we do. Really important. Check ourselves at all times on that. And then finally, automation of the processes, the technologies that you're doing is critical. It has to be reliable. It has to be repeatable. Automation, automate, automate, automate. That's sometimes how I talk about it. That's where you're going to end up going. All right? So let's talk a little bit more about the progress at T-Mobile. And this is kind of cool. I could put this slide in. There's been some new things that we really have been doing recently. So we went from now with the CIO telling the entire teams, this is up there, continuous delivery, agile methodology. We did a department reorganization. And this reorganization that happened was quite significant, actually. We're still getting the full ramifications, understanding of what that means and how to work in it. But only a few weeks ago, what came out was that the app support teams were going to be realigned. And what that was is we had a full app support organization for production, and then we have our development organization. And let's just, for now, we'll take two categories. Our web applications and UI, so things for our frontline customers, our tmobile.com site, all those activities. That's under one VP, and then we have another VP who's responsible for all the middleware. That's actually Chuck I talked about earlier. What they did is they said, all right, we're going to take the app support organization, and those that are responsible for supporting those front-end system, frontline systems, they're going to go underneath that VP. We're going to take the middleware systems, and we're going to go put them under Chuck in the middleware team. It's a significant, significant change and acknowledgement to where we need to go as an organization to support DevOps. So this is, I'm pretty excited about this. Again, we have our traditions, the way we've done things, and it takes time to work ourselves out of that. Another thing that I was incredibly skeptical about was that in one of our other organizations who has a lot of now, our VP Kathy, she has responsibility for things like project management, the QA organization. And she's been really trying to come up with ways to, how are we going to drive this new model, this new agile, continuous delivery DevOps model. And one of the things that happened was it was somebody within the organization, but somebody had not been involved with the dev teams, who was a Six Sigma guy, to go look at the process. And I'll admit, I was right up thinking, oh man, I've worked with Six Sigma's, black belt guys. Boy, it's all about process, all these things. I can't tell you how wrong I was about this. And I got to tell you, I was, Joe's his name. I'm a huge fan of his now. He won me over in seconds. He was about looking at the process, mapping it out, finding the inefficiencies, and drawing attention to it. This was, and just providing, and what was good about this was, it was not somebody like myself or somebody in the development organization. We're all going, the process is horrible. We don't like it. It's a big mess. Well, we could all agree didn't like it. But there's also a certain bias to that, right? People got to look at it and go, well, yeah, but the development teams just want to get things in 5 seconds, and they don't care about the quality and other stuff. And maybe the teams that put some of those processes in, but we have to have those. So here was a kind of a third party looking at it. That has really driven, I think, a lot of feedback and input into what we're going to do. He did a great mapping of some of those stuff. I have it on my desk every day. That chart is right there, and we're able to talk about those things. It really, I think, it may have seemed like in some cases it was a small thing in the process. I think this was a huge, huge step for us to do. And he did it in such a great way. We have a really kind of several offices, but we've got one up in the Bellevue, Seattle area, and one in Atlanta. He went to both places. He listened to everybody. He collected the information. and really did a nice job in summarizing it back. We also have started some pilot programs. And this is where, again, we're partnering up with the teams to talk about how to do the continuous delivery. I've put a proposal together, several others from my boss's organization. He really wants to kind of be at the forefront, help drive some of these things. They are good activities. Like I say, it's not overly ambitious. You know, you try to boil the ocean, do all these other things, there's too much, but it's not pure greenfield either. So those are some things that are really good for us. And admittedly, we still haven't yet tackled the bigger problems of the cross-platform challenges. We know they're there. There's a set of things we're going to do, but let's get our toes, legs, whatever, into the water, and we'll start talking more and more about how we're going to handle the cross-platform challenges, how we can get these things into incremental steps, get much more continuous delivery, smaller features out faster, et cetera. Something else, and this is my second to last slide. This is something I've liked talking about a lot recently. And the word I use is accountability. But I talk to my teams all about this. Maybe when my angst level gets driven up, it's because I don't feel like people are taking ownership in things. And so what I talk about is ask yourself, do I know who my customers are? All right? My customer, yeah, I can say, well, look, it's not that, I can say it's the T-Mobile customer ultimately, but I got a sales rep who's got to use my software, and are they happy with the software I've got? And I better be pretty realistic about it, because they're not happy with it, they're not using it, and we have a high percentage of the people come to our stores to buy product. So I better be enabling them. I better really understand that. I'll come back to that in just a moment about kind of that understanding. You'll have probably heard this in some of the other talks. Am I looking for ways to help improve and make things better for my customer? All right? So those types of things are really important, right? It could also be my customer is the app support guy, right? I want to be improving. Don't just give mantra. Don't just say, this is what I do. What you do is ultimately about how to make things better and to improve them. Do I own understanding how my work fits into the bigger picture? All right? This is another challenge. I can get so siloed that, and this is, you know, I can point to a QA or put all these teams. I point right into my own development teams. Guys, you can't be just about writing that piece of code and going, I did a feature. I had a team just 2 days ago put some code in. They didn't have approval on the design. And when they submitted, it got into the mainline code, because we're really working on trying to be more to a single branch. That code went in, and it was a horrible user experience. I was like, where did this come from? Well, we saw this problem, so we decided to fix it this way. Well, what if you fixed it this or this way, right? There were other options. But they were so focused on it, they just immediately went for that first thing. So again, understanding how you're doing it, how you're helping in the sustainability of the product, all right? And the ability to deliver to the customer. And this is what I talk about, the metrics, tracking and monitoring. Gene, I think, used the word instrumentation, right? And all the amount of instrumentation that they were using in some of these companies to see what is going on. We're by no means there, but I actually put into one of my mobility apps, every touch they do on a tablet is recorded. What does that do? That actually lets me show the business how the application's being used. That's direct feedback for them. I can also, we're working right now on putting the metrics together. Somebody, I saw something they're talking about, they were using, it was on Gene's, they were using Tableau. We're doing the same thing. We're taking our data that's being logged, putting it into Hadoop, and then I have a fellow who's building reports in Tableau to then use as a dashboard. And actually now we're working on trying to put together a bell curve to show them where the percentage of people who are using the tablets and who aren't. Where does 80% of the usage fall, for example? So that instrumentation when you're doing all this is really important. And again, it's all to this, when people are developing, don't be thinking in your silo. Also thinking again about how is my application viewed by the users? Do they like it? It's really easy to just go, man, I just built the greatest piece of code and it's the user's fault. They don't get how great it is. That, you know, in the end, that's probably not going to get us too far, right? I keep trying to relate. I had a services company with people at one time in the late 90s. We eventually sold it. But you get real appreciation for it. If the customer doesn't like what you're doing, you don't get paid. You don't get called back to do more work. It's hard sometimes, but to get the guys who are developers working there, that appreciation of what's going on. And then really here, am I thinking of beyond my functional area? Go back to those guiding principles. Open to new ideas, and change. All right, final slide. Educate, evaluate, ensure, and establish. This is what we're now trying to do on this journey. All these activities, these things I just talked about that we've been doing at T-Mobile with the organizational changes, all right? The team, where we're trying the cross-functional teams, this is about educating. It's evaluating how we're doing, ensuring we're following up on that, and then establish those practices as methodologies and things we can do carrying forward. That's right. And with that, I'm going to bring it to a close, but hopefully you find that some of you can relate to these. Again, this isn't the answer. We're on our journey. Where that road ends up, I can't tell you how I'm going to get there. We know what we want for that end point, but this is hopefully things that you can take away on activities you can do to help move yourselves in that same direction. All right. And with that, I thank you very much.